Hello, ladies and gentlemen. So, once again, we are turning to our book, Night. So, we are halfway through chapter three. So, we're going to finish up chapter three today. Quick, just refresher Ellie and his father are in Auschwitz, and they've been going through the check-in process like it's a hotel. They've been going through the process where they were stripped of all their clothing and all their belongings. They were hosed down. They were showered off. They were given prison clothes of all different sizes and craziness, and so now they are going to be moving into one of the barracks, which is kind of like a. I mean, think about it from Mice and Men. We talked about the bunkhouse, right? Like it's kind of going to be a large home where lots of people can all stay in one place. So let's go ahead and dive in. Not far from us, prisoners were at work. Some were digging holes, others were carrying sand. None as much as glanced at us. We were withered trees in the heart of the desert. Behind me, people were talking. I had no desire to listen to what they were saying, or to know who was speaking and what about. Nobody dared raise his voice, even though there was no guard around. We whispered, perhaps because of the thick smoke that poisoned the air and stung the throat. We were herded into yet another barrack inside the gypsy camp. We fell into ranks of 5. And now, stop moving! There was no floor, a roof and 4 walls. Our feet sank into the mud. Again, the waiting. I fell asleep standing up. I dreamed of a bed, of my mother's hand on my face. I woke. I was standing, my feet in the mud. Some people collapsed, sliding into the mud. Others shouted, are you crazy? We were told to stand. Do you want to get us all in trouble? As if all the troubles in the world were not already upon us. Little by little, we all sat around in the mud, but we had to get up whenever a capo came in to check, if by chance somebody had a new pair of shoes. If so, we had to hand them over. No use protesting. The blows multiplied, and in the end, one still had to hand them over. I had new shoes myself, but as they were covered with a thick coat of mud, they had not been noticed. I thanked God in an improvised prayer for having created mud in his infinite and wondrous universe. Suddenly, the silence became more oppressive. An SS officer had come in, and with him the smell of the angel of death. We stared at his fleshy lips. He harangued us from the center of the barrack. You are in a concentration camp! An Auschwitz! A pause. He was observing the effect his words had produced. His face remains in my memory to this day, a tall man, in his 30s, crime written all over his forehead and his gaze. He looked at us as one would a pack of leprous dogs clinging to life. Remember, he went on, remember it always. Let it be graven in your memories you are in Auschwitz, and Auschwitz is not a convalescent home. It is a concentration camp. Here you must work. If you don't, you will go straight to the chimney, to the crematorium. Work or crematorium. The choice is yours. We had already lived through a lot that night. We thought that nothing could frighten us any more. But his harsh words sent shivers through us. The word chimney here was not an abstraction. It floated in the air, mingled with the smoke. It was, perhaps, the only word that had a real meaning in this place. He left the barrack. The capos arrived, shouting, all specialists, locksmiths, carpenters, electricians, watchmakers, one step forward. The rest of us were transferred to yet another barrack, this one of stone. We had permission to sit down. A gypsy inmate was in charge. My father suddenly had a colic attack. He got up and asked politely in German, excuse me, could you tell me where the toilets are located? The gypsy stared at him for a long time, from head to toe. As if he wished to ascertain that the person addressing him was actually a creature of flesh and bone. a human being with a body and a belly. Then, as if waking from a deep sleep, he slapped my father with such force that he fell down and then crawled back to his place on all fours. I stood petrified. What had happened to me? My father had just been struck in front of me, and I had not even blinked. I had watched and kept silent. Only yesterday I would have dug my nails into this criminal's flesh. Had I changed that much so fast? Remorse began to gnaw at me. All I could think was, I shall never forgive them for this. My father must have guessed my thoughts because he whispered in my ear, "It doesn't hurt." His cheek still bore the red mark of the hand. "Everybody outside!" A dozen or so gypsies had come to join our guard. The clubs and whips were cracking around me. My feet were running on their own. I tried to protect myself from the blows by hiding behind others. It was spring. The sun was shining. "Fall in! 5 by 5!" The prisoners I had glimpsed that morning were working nearby. No guard in sight, only the chimney's shadow. Lulled by the sunshine and my dreams, I felt someone pulling at my sleeve. It was my father. "Come on, son." We marched. Gates opened and closed. We continued to march between the barbed wire. At every step, white signs with black skulls looked down on us. The inscription, "Warning! Danger of death!" But irony. Was there here a single place where one was not in danger of death? The gypsies had stopped next to the barrack. They were replaced by SS men who encircled us with machine guns and police dogs. The march lasted half an hour. Looking around me, I noticed that the barbed wire was behind us. We had left the camp. It was a beautiful day in May. The fragrances of spring were in the air. The sun was setting. But no sooner had we taken a few more steps than we saw the barbed wire of another camp. This one had an iron gate with the overhead inscription, "Work makes you free. Auschwitz." First impression, better than Birkenau. Cement buildings with 2 stories rather than wooden barracks, little gardens here and there. We were led toward one of those blocks. Seated on the ground by the entrance, we began to wait again. From time to time, somebody was allowed to go in. These were the showers, a compulsory routine. Going from one camp to the other several times a day, we had each time to go through them. After the hot shower, we stood shivering in the darkness. Our clothes had been left behind. We had been promised other clothes. Around midnight, we were told to run. "Faster!" yelled our guards. "The faster you run, the faster you'll get to go to sleep." After a few minutes of racing madly, we came to a new block. The man in charge was waiting. He was a young Pole who was smiling at us. He began to talk to us, and despite our weariness, we listened attentively. "Comrades, you are now in the concentration camp Auschwitz. Ahead of you lies a long road paved with suffering. Don't lose hope. You have already eluded the worst danger, the selection. Therefore, muster your strength and keep your faith. We shall all see the day of liberation. Have faith in life, 1,000 times faith. By driving out despair, you will move away from death. Hell does not last forever. And now here is a prayer, or rather a piece of advice. Let there be camaraderie among you. We are all brothers and share the same fate. The same smoke hovers over all our heads. Help each other. That is the only way to survive. And now, enough said. You are tired. Listen, you are in Block 17. I am responsible for keeping order here. Anyone with a complaint may come to see me. That is all. Go to sleep. 2 people to a bunk. Good night." Those were the first human words. No sooner had we climbed into our bunks than we fell into a deep sleep. The next morning, the veteran inmates treated us without brutality. We went to wash. We were given new clothes. They brought us black coffee. We left the block around 10 o'clock so it could be cleaned. Outside, the sun warmed us. Our morale was much improved. A good night's sleep had done its work. Friends met, exchanged a few sentences. We spoke of everything without ever mentioning those who had disappeared. The prevailing opinion was that the war was about to end. At about noon, we were brought some soup, one bowl of thick soup for each of us. I was terribly hungry, yet I refused to touch it. I was still the spoiled child of long ago. My father swallowed my ration. We then had a short nap in the shade of the block. That SS officer in the muddy barrack must have been lying. Auschwitz was, after all, a convalescent home. In the afternoon, they made us line up. 3 prisoners brought a table and some medical instruments. We were told to roll up our sleeves and file past the table. The 3 veteran prisoners, needles in hand, tattooed numbers on our left arms. I became A7713. From then on, I had no other name. At dusk, a roll call. The commandos had returned. The orchestra played military marches near the camp entrance. Tens of thousands of inmates stood in rows while the SS checked their numbers. After the roll call, the prisoners from all the blocks dispersed, looking for friends, relatives, or neighbors among the arrivals of the last convoy. Days went by. In the mornings, black coffee. At midday, soup. By the 3rd day, I was eagerly eating any kind of soup. At 6 o'clock in the morning, roll call, followed by bread with something. At 9 o'clock, bedtime. We had already been in Auschwitz for 8 days. It was after roll call. We stood waiting for the bell announcing its end. Suddenly, I noticed someone passing between the rows. I heard him ask, "Who among you is Weissel from Saget?" The person looking for us was a small fellow with spectacles and a wizened face. My father answered, "That's me, Weissel from Saget." The fellow's eyes narrowed. He took a long look at my father. You don't know me? You don't recognize me? I'm your relative, Stein. Already forgotten. Stein from Antwerp. Reisel's husband. Your wife was Reisel's aunt. She wrote often to us in such letters. My father had not recognized him. He must have barely known him, always being up to his neck in communal affairs and not knowledgeable in family matters. He was always somewhere, he was always elsewhere, lost in thought. Once, a cousin came to us in Saget. She had stayed at our house and eaten at our table for 2 weeks before my father noticed her presence for the first time. No, he did not remember Stein. I recognized him right away. I had known Reisel, his wife, before she had left for Belgium. He told us that he had been deported in 1942. He said, "I heard people say that a transport had arrived from your region, and I came to look for you. I thought you might have news of Reisel and my 2 small boys who stayed in Antwerp." I knew nothing about them. Since 1940, my mother had not received a single letter from them. But I lied. Yes, my mother did hear from them. Reisel is fine, so are the children. He was weeping with joy. He would have liked to stay longer, to learn more details, to soak up the good news, but an SS was heading in our direction, and he had to go, telling us that he would come back the next day. The bell announced that we were dismissed. We went to fetch the evening meal, bread and margarine. I was terribly hungry and swallowed my ration on the spot. My father told me, "You mustn't eat all at once. Tomorrow is another day." But seeing that his advice had come too late, and that there was nothing left of my ration, he didn't even start his own. "I'm not hungry," he said. We remained in Auschwitz for 3 weeks. We had nothing to do. We slept a lot, in the afternoon and at night. Our one goal was to avoid the transports, to stay here as long as possible. It wasn't difficult. It was enough never to sign up as a skilled worker. The unskilled were kept until the end. At the start of the 3rd week, our Blackalteste was removed. He was judged too humane. The new one was ferocious, and his aides were veritable monsters. The good days were over. We began to wonder whether it wouldn't be better to let ourselves be chosen for the next transport. Stein, our relative from Antwerp, continued to visit us, and from time to time He would bring a half portion of bread. Here, this is for you, Eleazar. Every time he came, tears would roll down his icy cheeks. He would often say to my father, "Take care of your son. He is very weak, very dehydrated. Take care of yourselves. You must avoid selection. Eat anything, anytime. Eat all you can. The weak don't last very long around here." And he himself is so thin, so withered, so weak. "The only thing that keeps me alive," he kept saying, "is to know that Rysel and the little ones are still alive. And were it not for them, I would give up." One evening he came to see us, his face radiant. "A transport just arrived from Antwerp. I shall go to see them tomorrow. Surely they will have news." He left. We never saw him again. He had been given the news. The real news. Evenings, as we lay on our cots, we sometimes tried to sing a few Hasidic melodies. Akiba drummer would break our hearts with his deep, grave voice. Some of the men spoke of God, his mysterious ways, the sins of the Jewish people, and the redemption to come. As for me, I had ceased to pray. I concurred with Job. I was not denying his existence, but I doubted his absolute justice. Akiba drummer said, "God is testing us. He wants to see whether we are capable of overcoming our base instincts, of killing the Satan within ourselves. We have no right to despair, and if he punishes us mercilessly, it is a sign that he loves us that much more." Hirsch Gund, well versed in Kabbalah, spoke of the end of the world and the coming of the Messiah. From time to time, in the middle of all that talk, a thought crossed my mind. Where is Mother right now? Diaspora. "Mother is still a young woman," my father once said. "She must be in a labor camp. And Diaspora, she is a big girl now. She too must be in a camp." How we would have liked to believe that. We pretended, for what if one of us still did believe? All the skilled workers had already been sent to other camps. Only about 100 of us, simple laborers, were left. "Today it's your turn," announced the block secretary. "You are leaving with the next transport." At 10 o'clock we were handed our daily ration of bread. A dozen or so SS surrounded us. At the gate a sign proclaimed that work meant freedom. We were counted. And there we were in the countryside on a sunny road, in the sky a few small white clouds. We were walking slowly. The guards were in no hurry. We were glad of it. As we were passing through some of the villages, many Germans watched us, showing no surprise. No doubt they had seen quite a few of these processions. On the way, we saw some young German girls. The guards began to tease them. The girls giggled. They allowed themselves to be kissed and tickled, bursting with laughter. They all were laughing, joking, and passing love notes to one another. At least during that time, we endured neither shouting nor blows. After 4 hours, we had arrived at the new camp, Buna. The iron gate closed behind us. All right, so the threat of the crematory, the flame, the smoke. We had some fires recently, and if you remember, the air was so thick with the ash, it was even hard to breathe. And then imagine that being the ash of human flesh. Ugh, how terrible. All right, Ellie's father has colic, it's gas, it's cramping in your stomach and intestines. Ugh. This copy has lavatories as the word, it's bathroom. In the PDF we're looking at, it says the bathroom or the restroom. And what happens here is his father walks up and says, "Can I use the restroom?" And this guy looks at him and then just boom, knocks him to the ground. And the point here is that Ellie's father had no business even speaking to this person. "I don't care about you. I don't care about your sickness. I don't care about you going to the bathroom. You get away from me." It's power, it's control, it's authority. It's vile, it's mean, it's violent. It's terrible. Pay attention to the father-son relationship. I mentioned this at the very beginning of the book. So, how would you feel if you were standing there and someone basically punched your father down to the ground? I've never seen that happen to my dad. I hope my children never see that happen to me. And Ellie here, he's very honest. He says, I didn't do anything. I didn't move. I didn't stand to protect him. He says, yesterday I would have scratched this guy's face off. But today, nothing. I don't know. That's complicated. On one hand, I understand. On the other hand, I think maybe he should have defended his father. I don't know. Like, survival, if I survive and my father gets beat, it's my survival, right? Like, every man for himself kind of a thing. I don't know. It's tough. It's tricky. It's complicated. There's no good, smooth, easy answer here. That's why we read these stories, to help us think through these things. Okay. It's darkly ironic. There's these electric fences around basically saying, be careful, you could die if you touch them. Everyone's looking around like, there's a Nazi with a gun. There's a Nazi with a gun. There's a furnace that's burning people alive. You think I'm concerned about the electric fence? Darkly ironic. There's a dark, sick, and twisted humor to it. All right. This is, of course, very tragic, but one of the realities that they were tattooed. And so here are some pictures of Nazi concentration camp survivors showing off their tattoos. One thing I found interesting in my research for this is that family members, children and grandchildren, are now getting their own tattoos with the same number. Because that generation of people is dying out, some of the younger family members are trying to keep the memory alive by getting their own tattoos of these numbers. So, anyway, it's pretty tragic to be reduced to simply a number, to take away your name and just make you a number. All right, critical reading. So, Stein comes and he wants news of his wife and children, and Ellie lies to him. And then we get this. People were coming from the Antwerp region. He goes to see them, and they never see him again. He had news, real news. What do you think the news was? Yeah, I think that he got news that his family had died. We never saw him again, which probably tells me he gave up, because just a minute ago he said, the only reason why I continue is the hope I have of my family being alive. And then they never saw him again, which tells me he lost hope. And if he lost hope, it's probably because he found out real news that his family had died, and so he gave up, which of course is sad and tragic. Okay, the very beginning of the year, one of the things we talked about was biblical literacy. We did talk specifically about Job. First of all, it's not Job. How do we know? Because the capital J sympathized with Job. If he said sympathize with Job, that doesn't make any sense at all whatsoever. So, critical readers, pay attention to the details. Job here. Real quick reminder, Job was the man who loved God. And Satan said to God, give me Job. I think he only loves you because he's rich and blessed. And God says, you can do what you want with him, just do not kill him. And Satan kills his family, takes away his home and his livestock and all of his riches. And Job literally is left desolate with boils and just painful skin conditions. And you can see in this picture maybe a little bit on his arms here, some of those boils on his body. Although, let's be honest, he's pretty cut up, pretty ripped. Yeah. But here all of Job's friends come and they point at Job and they say, you must have done something against God. You must have said something against God. And Job goes, I didn't. I love God. I don't understand what God is doing, but I love God. And so here, Eleazar, in his Jewish understanding of the world is looking at Job, a man from the Jewish Bible, right? He's in the Old Testament Bible, and he sympathized with Job. And Eliezer is basically saying, we did nothing to deserve this. This is not our fault. And yet our lives are completely miserable and ruined. So that's why you should have some of that biblical literacy so that you can make these connections, so that you know who the character is and you understand what's being said. Okay, hopefully that helps explain a little bit to you. All right, so what's going on so far? Ellie's family were kicked out of their home. They were sent to a ghetto, packed onto a train. The train ride was terrible. There's been little food and not enough water. At Birkenau, Ellie was separated from his mother and sister. The prisoners were shuffled from one place to another. Their clothes were taken from them. They were given random prison clothes that usually didn't fit. There's little food. Ellie's father feels a little ill. He gets that colic, that cramping. They continue to be shifted from one place to another. At the end of the chapter, Ellie and his father have been sent to Buna, a work camp, and everything's been horrible. And they've been under threat of death the entire time. So, all right, that's all for now, ladies and gentlemen. We will catch you later. Maybe. Here we go. Bye now.